I'm Troy Thompson. Over the last 15 years, our family has worked hard to create a place we call the center of the universe. A place where our kids and someday our grandkids can come home to and laugh, have fun, learn how to work, pray, worship God, and be a place to celebrate life with all our friends. After a quarter century in uniform, I put away one set of boots for another, working on our acreage, improving the land, fixing some structures, and building new ones. We say, give back to the community, be useful, keep your hands calloused, and spread the gospel. This is a little place in a little state right in the middle of flyover country, from which cries out a voice in the wilderness to all who might want to listen, learn, and laugh along with us. This is our American dream.
Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to Sunnyside. Wow, can you believe it? Just a few days ago, the guy that I had talked about early on and have been following via Twitter and emails in a variety of other ways, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has dropped out of the race for President of the United States, and as I'm sure you're well aware of right now, has gone and endorsed none other than Donald Trump for president, and will be and has been apparently working with him to some degree on things that they agree upon, which primarily boils down, according to Kennedy, just a few things. He doesn't like the legal warfare that the Biden administration, in his opinion, has waged against both Donald Trump and himself. He doesn't like the continuous wars that are going on and seem to be gleefully pursued by both sides of the aisle in one way or another. And he doesn't like the situation of our kids' health. And so apparently those are things that they agree on, and probably some other things, I imagine, in the economy even. And Robert F. Kennedy, coming from the Kennedy clan of yore, the Camelot era, his uncle, John F. Kennedy, and his dad, Robert Kennedy, just two guys brothers that, despite their foibles, were pretty popular in the Democrat Party for eons, and probably still are, and might be. I mean, they're in that manifold of tremendous Democrat presidents, right? You've got FDR, who is, responsible for the New Deal and all of the introductory socialism that had accompanied the New Deal prospect and gave us socialist security and all of these other untouchable benefits that people have. And then, of course, you've got the Kennedys there. I mean, they don't talk too much about Truman. He did drop the bomb on Japan, both of them, two of them, and then they right up there, I suppose, with the Clintons. Although I think the Clintons, to some degree, have fallen out of favor after with the new the fresher content of the Obamas. And the Kennedys were always in that group. It's the memories of finer days, of greater days, of more innocent days, and all of this other stuff. And then RFK Jr. has been fairly popular until a few years ago when COVID happened, and he was opposed to the untested COVID vaccine. He didn't like the way that the corporate America had kind of infiltrated the FDA and the different organizations that were in charge of deciding what it was that we were going to do with our health decisions regarding a vaccine for COVID, and then he just really became an unpopular person in the Democrat Party, which is for freedom, 100% freedom. And they had every intention of keeping people as free as you possibly could during the COVID situation, by keeping them, free to be locked in their homes. And if you're in Minnesota, you can have a hotline that, Governor Walz, you could call Tim and say if your neighbor wasn't wearing a mask and all these other, very free and that type of stuff. So very interesting. And anyway, RFK was just kind of an interesting character to me, RFK Jr. And I said in previous podcasts, I like a lot of things about RFK Jr. I don't agree with all of his ideas about how to solve environmental issues, but that's kind of what he's known for, kind of particularly the taking care of the environment in the United States for decades, and then also taking on large pharmaceutical companies and doing so, and chemical companies and really large corporate conglomerates. Like, he got pretty good at that. He had his moments as a younger man, and those are pretty well known, as did, I suppose, all of us. Maybe not to the extent and audacity that he had. So I don't have any I don't feel any need to apologize for the foibles of the people that are running for president or their vice presidential candidates. I mean, that is, I don't know. I guess it just is what it is. But here's a Kennedy, and that was supposed to be the gold standard to some degree in the Democrat Party, and he's just, he's just not welcome. And persona non grata, I guess, non grata or non gratis, and anymore. And I think that he feels, and he said it, that the way that he was treated by the Democratic Party, which I believe he probably feels a little bit of ownership in. Not that you can own a party necessarily, but I think he has a familial relationship with the Democrat Party. I mean, his grandfather was, ambassador to England, and before that, a pretty notable, honorable, corrupt bootlegger, maybe a guy involved with prostitution rings. We don't really know. I mean, Joseph Kennedy was an interesting character, and taught his sons, how to treat women and all of these other things. So, as a guy who grew up on the conservative side of the house and not being enamored with the Kennedys, and I had a particular critical eye towards the Kennedys growing up, but I did admire John F. Kennedy, at least, his book as a senator, Profiles in Courage. I thought it was one of the better books, and I've recommended it to my sons to read. And I admired his service in World War II, and I admired what he attempted to do anyway as president. And as president, John F. Kennedy was not bad on the economy, and he certainly wasn't a communist, and he certainly wasn't a socialist. And socialism is how you get to communism, and we're in a weird place in history right now where, and I don't know if maybe it's always been like this. People think history only goes back to like the day they were born, or maybe a little bit into their parents' life. But for the most part, people's far-reaching understanding of history is vastly limited. And so maybe it's not unusual that we're in a time period where it seems like a good part of at least the youthful electorate has no idea that all of these concepts that have been promoted, and there are not very many that have been promoted, at least as far as policy goes, by the Harris-Walz campaign, but these economic policies or ideas or suggestions that they're putting forward have been tried before, and they're not good. Whether it is dealing with the what they consider price gouging by the evil grocery stores. And we all pay more at the grocery store, for sure. But then, the grocery stores are also, they're getting their stuff from their suppliers and their food products from the suppliers. Suppliers are getting their from the farmers or wherever it happens to come from. And apparently the margin for profit in the grocery industry is about 1.2 or 2.1, like 2%, less than 2%, which is ridiculous, ridiculously low. And it is that way because there's so much competition. But the very things that the illustrious geniuses in the in the Harris administration to be when it comes to the economy, they are convinced that if they impose more regulation and just price controls on your groceries, that will solve the problem. And obviously it will not. What it will do is it will put smaller grocers out of business. It will reduce competition, and then you will have the same problem that they ultimately had in Soviet Russia. But when your daddy was a socialist, professor, most of these ideas seem really good. And since you've never actually employed or run anyone, in your own business, or started your own business, or, worked anywhere besides McDonald's as a teenager, you're not particularly handy, perhaps, with numbers. And I have a big problem, obviously, with how the Harris administration to be plans on dealing with things in the economy. They're not good at it. Democrats aren't good with the economy. They're not good. You can tax your way. You can tax everybody you want. You could tax Oprah, who's a billionaire 3 times over. I thought it was funny last week during and RFK Jr. pointed this out to some degree in his, in his speech when he was talking about, joining Donald Trump and why he was leaving the race to some degree. But the people that were standing on the stage at the Democratic National Convention were making fun of all of the people that had these Ivy League educations, and that their keynote speakers all had Ivy League educations. And the man from Hope, Bill Clinton, President Clinton, was there, and his story was, came from nothing and went through Oxford and Yale and did all these amazing things and found his way, right? And if you put that on the shoulders of J.D. Vance, who also had tremendous poverty, and they made a movie about his experiences as a young person, and unlike Bill Clinton, he joined the Marine Corps and went and did those things, and yet somehow Tim Waltz, who went to Chadron State, and which is fine, is talking about how he had kids in his classroom, 24 kids in my classroom, and none of them went to Yale. And I don't even know what that means. I've never been enamored with the Ivy League. Doesn't mean anything to me, because I've met people who have those type of degrees and they don't particularly seem impressive. They don't seem that particularly witty. But if you're impressed with that sort of thing, then that maybe is important to you. And I think it still must be important to the people that were putting the DNC, the convention, together, because that's who a lot of those, that was what they had for their credentials. And it seemed weird that was, it's just let's just assume that the hypocrisy is just, that's the real thing. That's just what it is. There's hypocrisy in politics. There's hypocrisy in people who are running for office. It doesn't matter what their stripe is. And there's hypocrisy in the press. And I think that one of the biggest problems that, of many that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had or has with his experiences trying to run for president and getting on the ballot across the nation in many, many, many states. He did that. And he was on the ballot in some cases in many states before Joe Biden would have been on. And they had the debate between Joe Biden, the notorious debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And one of the qualifications that apparently kept him from being able to be in the debate as a third party candidate was that they said he wasn't on the ballot. And there were many, and he was, and Joe Biden wasn't. I don't think Donald Trump was, actually. I don't remember when that exactly happened. They had to have received the nomination. So obviously, clearly Harris wasn't on the ticket other than as the vice presidential candidate. Now she's received, the nomination officially and all of that. And he just has problems with that. And I think he has a right to feel that way, because I feel like it is a joke. The party that I thought had the most, I think that the Democrats, when they do it, have done it correctly. They have the most interesting caucuses in Iowa, where they actually have this very, I don't want to say fun, but it is kind of a fun, chaotic moment where you're voting down to decide who it is you're going to get to be the person you're choosing in the caucus as your nominee, who you'd want to have at the top of the ticket. And the Republicans don't do that. They just do a straight vote. But the Democrats have always done this, what I thought was a more interesting and fun way of doing a caucus, and they didn't do that this year. And they didn't do that. And they just primaries across the country for the Democrats were basically it's Biden. It's got to be Biden, and they kept people off the ticket. And they conducted they had lawsuits to keep RFK out, and they just put Joe Biden in the front. And they just seemed crooked. And on top of all of that, we already seen all the things that they've done as a party, or people that are affiliated with the Democrat Party, the things that they did, what they call lawfare now, as with Donald Trump and the different lawsuits that they've brought up against him just over and over and over again. And of course, most of those are you've seen them be washed away in one form or another, except for the 632,000 felony charges that came out of Manhattan. Those were obviously all legit. So there's things that Trump and RFK Jr. have in common, and a big part of what they have in common is the press and the way that the media in general has treated RFK Jr. And he's kind of heard about the whole thing. He's heard about how the party treated him. Not that you're entitled to anything because your last name is Kennedy. You have to earn your way. But I would say that he went out and was very successful as a third-party candidate and gleaned a lot of interest from people who were Democrats and remembered a Democrat Party that actually was for some liberties and a different way of doing things that wasn't wrapped up in transgenderism and abortion, which was just crazy that last week to me, like, oh, people, what are you doing? Like, I believe that there are people that are obviously, I think they're Christian, I suppose, and they're voting Democrat. I don't understand how you do that and have a party that is, giving free abortions outside of your, it's just, where are we? What Twilight Zone episode are we in where that is a good thing? Grandma with your, lifelong Democrat grandma, how are you justifying that? Because you're pretty close to the grave, and you're going to have to answer for the support. And it's just, I'm not going to talk much anymore about the Democrat convention. I didn't watch everything. I didn't watch everything in the Republican convention because at the end of the day, it's really just a big pep rally for the party. What they actually do is they establish, planks and platforms and decide what they're going to move forward. And they pick their nominees and it's the business end. You don't see any of that. It's just all about the hoopla at night. It's kind of like getting the highlights from the Olympics, at night, 8 hours later or whatever. So it's that the conventions to me are all about the same. And I am conservative. So I felt that there was more to the Republican convention than there was the Democrat convention. RFK made the point in his speech that they mentioned Donald Trump's name 34 times or something like that in the first night of the DNC. And they mentioned, Biden's name was mentioned, and this was before Harris was unceremoniously, crowned the nominee by the Democrat Party without any input from the voters because they never needed your input in the first place. They don't need you. You'll do what they tell you to do, like you always do. So it's crazy to me that that is what happened. But at the Republican convention, they mentioned Biden's name twice, and he's the main person, that he's the contender, like who we're going to run against. And at the time, and they mentioned his name twice, and that was, I think, Trump. And he said he wasn't going to do it, and he did. But then he went on and gave a ridiculously long, speech that just rambled on forever. At least Kamala Harris's speech was shorter than Trump's, and all of that. So what I like about this situation with RFK Jr. Here's what I think what we should do if what we should do, like I'm part of the decision. Nobody's calling me up asking for my advice. I don't know what role in the cabinet that RFK Jr. is going to try to get. I don't know what he'll end up doing. I know he's going to be campaigning, and he is campaigning. He took himself off of the ballot in the swing states, and this I feel is something that indicates a good amount of integrity. He left himself on in the states where it's not going to matter. He's he's on where they're gonna vote blue no matter what. He's on where they're gonna vote red no matter what. He didn't take himself off of those because he's not going to really affect anything. And he admitted that there's still a way off possibility that in those states that he could still, possibly get elected in a weird, unusual, and unlikely circumstance. So that he did leave his name out there. I'm sure to not completely abandon the people that he gave a tremendous amount of credit to doing all of that work for his campaign for these last 16 months. And I thought that was pretty classy. Like those people gave him their time, their heart and soul, the money, all of the things that they did to try to get RFK Jr. elected, regardless of what his, options were. A lot of them were disenchanted Democrats. A lot of them were disenchanted Republicans. And a lot of them were just folks in the middle, which is where a lot of us in America are for the most part when it comes to policy. And he had some wacky ideas, but he was always able and willing to communicate, to take interviews, and to express his ideas to anyone who would listen. This is something that we have not seen. And Trump does the same thing. He'll talk to Theo Von in a weird, one-on-one long-form conversation that really revealed some interesting, I guess, almost backstory into Donald Trump's lack of knowledge about pop culture, particularly drugs and alcohol. Theo Von is a bit of a PhD from his life experience and those type of things, and a comedian, very funny. Trump's reaction to some of the things that Theo Von said to me, if you haven't seen it, go check it out, was very telling of that. Here's a guy that, he doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't do drugs. It wasn't part of his life, regardless of the Playboy image that he had throughout, most of the 70s and 80s and maybe even to the 90s. He clearly doesn't know anything about that stuff. So that's interesting, and an interesting, I suppose, parallel to, maybe say like the Biden family or whatnot. They've obviously had some experiences with those type of things, not particularly Joe Biden necessarily, but Hunter made up for it. And I think, which is neither here nor there, but you don't really see the same headlines. And you certainly would if it existed with any of the Trump kids. So here you have RFK Jr., you have Donald Trump, and they're willing to talk to anybody who'll listen. And then you have Vice President Harris, and she won't talk to. She's not talking to anybody. She prefers to use a teleprompter. She practices having a dinner meeting with whomever. So she has to rehearse that with her staff. So I don't know how apt she's going to be. Well, I know how she's going to be inept, in my opinion, but that's not how maybe half the country feels. So I just think that it'll be interesting to see how an RFK Jr. fits into a Trump administration if he wins again. RFK believes that it's Trump's last term. And despite what Alec Baldwin and some of the other lunatics that are out there, Robert De Niro, guys, stick with acting. I mean, you're really good at it. Just stick with that. Stick with what you know, and they're convinced that somehow this will be the last election. We're never going to have an election again. It's ridiculous. And because it's Trump, it would be Trump's last term. He's got 4 years. He's going to do things that are probably it could be a very devastating thing for the Democrat Party. And I suppose that's why they're flipping out. And that doesn't bother me at all, because I would like to see the Republican Party and the Democrat Party really taken down several notches in their power and authority. And I've said that many, many times. They're not helpful whatsoever. So in this case, who has the better motive for truly dismantling what most Americans would agree is corrupt? With what we have a lot of corruption in our government. Regardless of how you think we got there, whether you think it's the military-industrial complex, yep, there's waste, fraud, and abuse. Waste, fraud, and abuse in the military, as there is in every, bureaucracy in the executive branch. There's problems in the legislative branch too, but this doesn't really solve that. I mean, there's going to be lots of people down ticket who are running for Congress and for Senate that you can, if you think that Trump is more likely to fix those problems than the people who are currently in power, who have no intention to fix those problems, and in fact, by executive order, have made it difficult to even change, well, not even executive order, have made it difficult for another administration to come in and remove bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats, from their position. They've made it incredibly difficult to do that. They, being the Democrats, have a vested interest in keeping those, public employee union dues-paying individuals in unelected positions deep inside all levels of our government in their jobs, because you can wait out 4 years. And there's no incentive whatsoever for the Democrats to change anything. So it's ridiculous to believe that the Democrats would change anything with President Harris and a Vice President Walz. It would be ridiculous to assume that or believe that there would be any change whatsoever. And if there was, why would there even need to be a change if things are going so swimmingly under President Biden and Vice President Harris? There shouldn't be any need for a change. It should just be the continued upward awesomeness that is already occurring. And so none of this stuff, to me, washes very well. It appears to me that you would have a better chance of making true, very decisive cuts in our federal government leviathan with a Donald Trump who's got 4 years to clean house and make changes, and a guy and a group of people that are with him that are going to say, this is the direction we're going to go. We're going to get this ship righted, and we're going to do it by cleaning up a lot of these things. I don't have any doubt in my mind that they would absolutely have a better success on the world stage, partly because whether it's respect or fear because of with Donald Trump, you just saw it. We already had 4 years where we just saw a world that was like, okay, that's cool, and he didn't really apologize. Trump doesn't apologize for America and anything, and I think that is a big difference in foreign policy. But the thing that I'm excited, I think, most about with the RFK situation is, besides Trump having the greatest incentive to make some pretty significant changes, particularly in the executive branch of the federal government, RFK Jr. has a huge incentive as well. He has a family history of things that need to be addressed. Several, many people have claimed that the FBI is, at least at the highest levels, not at the agent level on the ground, is corrupt. And they're using examples of raids on Mar-a-Lago or different types of prosecutions, or, going after people through the Department of Justice who are parents, in Virginia reacting to school board meetings and this type of thing. And the FBI gets involved in those type of things, and on and on and on. RFK Jr. has a little bit of an issue with the FBI as well. His dad and J. Edgar Hoover weren't particularly friendly on any terms. There are problems with the deep state military industrial complex, and a lot of neocons, a lot of Republicans absolutely just love the idea of, I don't even know if they know what it means. We're going to have a strong military, see? Strong military. Strong. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that they're very creative. Republicans aren't particularly creative when it comes to figuring out how to have a strong military that's better than we currently have, because we could be a lot better, and we could be a lot faster and sleeker, and we could do it with spending out a lot less money, and we don't have to be all over the world, and we don't have to have constantly be in these conflicts that don't have an end and a clear beginning. I don't think that RFK Jr., and he wouldn't be president anyway, but I don't think he's the person that would necessarily advocate my philosophy on how you deal with the military. And I don't think that Donald Trump would necessarily either. But I think that you can take the Army and the Air Force, and you can reduce those in scale by increasing in scale in the reserve element. You can reduce the active component significantly. You can close bases, which is heretical if you because it is hard on those towns, where they have been built up and everything. But that's the federal government's job, isn't to make sure that, the towns that surround a federal military installation, have their pawn shops and their restaurants. That's not the federal government's responsibility. An obligation to the taxpayers. Republicans don't like doing that. They don't like base closures and realignments. They don't like cutting spending on useless things. They don't quite have a good, clear direction of what it takes to be a true QRF force from the active duty side in the Army or the Air Force, and they don't understand the value, probably because they're being whispered to by the chiefs of staff in the at the Pentagon that are, they're saying, hey, you can't. The reserves. Come on, how good can they be? Even though the National Guard, fought did 50% of the missions worldwide for the last 20 years for the United States Army, and they did it on 10% of the budget. So it's quite phenomenal, the possibilities that are. But I don't think that Trump's going to change anything with that. He's going to spend more money. If you're a Republican and you think that you are a fiscal conservative, you may be, but but Donald Trump is not. He spent a ridiculous amount of money the last time he was in office. He'll spend a lot of money this time. And so there won't be much change there. But I think he will go after some restructuring in the executive branch. What those will be, can't say for sure. But I could say for sure that if you made RFK Jr., instead of putting him in charge of Health and Human Service or whatever, no, he's a lawyer. Brace yourselves. Why not have RFK Jr. be the Attorney General? Why not have that guy in charge of the Justice Department to clean house at the FBI? Why not have that guy take a shot at the CIA, which he's no friends with? Why not have that guy focus on the corruption and the lawfare that's going on across the nation? Why not have RFK Jr. as the in charge of the Department of Justice, as the top lawman in the country, like his dad was, go after the organized crime and the child, the human trafficking and the drug situation that we've got all across the country? Why not have RFK Jr. Take a look at those things, because that is stuff that he cares about, and it would keep him a little bit distracted from some of the other things that he has successfully prosecuted in court, that I may not be as keen on, some of the environmental things, because I think the other side of it that they probably don't agree on is that Trump will very much seek to make the United States very energy independent, like we were prior to, in 2019 we were energy independent, and then after the election in 2020 and 2021 we became, we have to go around and beg with hand in hat, for oil, and then open up our own reserves so that we can lower prices in time for a midterm election. Energy independence, petroleum, coal, hopefully nuclear. Those are all things that RFK Jr. is not particularly keen on. So I wouldn't put him in charge of, some of those departments. But I think he would be awesome in many ways as the Attorney General. Now, that's a coveted role in any administration, for sure. And that is something that there's probably some really rich Republicans who have spent a lot of time on the MAGA train that really feel like they're in line to hold that job. And so I don't know if that job might be too big to give to RFK Jr. But on the other hand, if RFK Jr., who, depending on where he was polling, in what state, if it's between 5 and 10%, that is going to, even if it's split, it's going to make a difference in the thousands of voters in any given state, particularly in those swing states. If half of his group, of his supporters vote for Trump, it can carry the election. In fact, new polling data might support that it is actually a 52-48 advantage to Trump now, since RFK Jr. has endorsed him. We'll see. It's still going to ultimately come down to the Electoral College. But they think, some people have thought that this is an advantage to Trump, clearly more than Harris, in particular with states like Pennsylvania and Georgia and potentially even Wisconsin. I know, that's crazy. So those are places that, those are the battleground states. And it's possible that now with the addition of RFK's, not on RFK Jr. not being on the ballot in those swing states, that makes the difference. And in that case, if that's the situation, then does Donald Trump kind of owe RFK some credit for his election? I don't know if Donald Trump has the capacity to think that way in any regard. I don't know. I mean, one of the criticisms, I don't know how accurate they are, but I mean, one of the criticisms is that he's not notorious for potentially maybe paying all of his debts. And so there's nothing to say that he would reward RFK Jr. with a cabinet position, although he has said that he would be open to it. But would it be the Attorney General? And would that be too big of a spot? I just think it would be incredible to have an RFK in there again, because one thing that his dad, Bobby Kennedy, did very well was, even though there probably were some debts owed to the organized crime families in the 60s, from the Kennedys to whomever, whatever syndicates, Bobby Kennedy still went after those organizations. He did a lot to stymie and deal with the corrupt actions of the CIA and the things that they're still doing with the CIA. And I feel like there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up. And Donald Trump's a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. RFK Jr., a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. What would happen if you gave those two guys the opportunity to clean up the executive branch? I would be very interested, and I am very interested. Like I said, I like RFK Jr. I was honestly surprised that he endorsed Trump. I got to imagine that his wife, Cheryl Hines, is not particularly excited about that. Hollywood, Democrat, and he has acknowledged that as well. The Kennedy family has, I don't say that they've necessarily disowned him, but they're not particularly pleased with him at all. Keep in mind, the Kennedy family helped Richard Nixon get elected to the Senate in California. I mean, or the Congress, whatever it was, I can't remember. Like the Kennedy family provided money to get him elected and to win over a Democrat in California back in the 50s. So I guess it probably served their purposes. Maybe that's why they did it back then. But at the end of the day, I think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is still what I would consider an old school Democrat, the kind of Democrat that I grew up not necessarily admiring, but respecting, in the sense that I appreciated what it was that they were trying to do. I think that they won a lot of battles. I don't think that they made everything better. I think they made some things worse in their policies. But I appreciated the idea, anyway, that a lot of Democrats still say that the reason they're a Democrat is because they want to help people, that they believe that the Democrat Party is about taking care of the little guy. And I would say that that's right, but I'd say it's right in the sense that, in the populist term, the terminology of populism, that, taking care of the little guy, giving them the opportunity to not be the little guy anymore. I think what separates the RFK Juniors of today from the modern Democrat Party, not necessarily the Democrats that are in the party out on the street, our friends and neighbors and that type of thing, is that I think the friends and neighbors, they still believe that they're just trying to help the little guy be successful and get a leg up on life and move on. And I think that the larger vision of the Democrat Party is that they're going to use that mantra, but the idea is that you stay little, and you're supposed to stay the little guy, and then you owe us. And so it marginalizes and pigeonholes people into groups. You're, white guys for Harris, or, you're in a LGBTQ plus whatever, and you're in, or you're, a particular, an ethnicity or a color or a religion. And that's how you're put into, it's like they spent too long in college in political science, which doesn't have a tremendous amount of value in my opinion, but they spent all the time trying to catalog where people fit, that they have no longer any agency, and then they just put people into their boxes and they all will vote the way, and then this is how you get them to manipulate, to vote the way you want. And by helping people stay the little guy, you would think then that the little guy would vote for you. But the Republican that I grew up with, not the era of the Republicans in the 50s, the Eisenhower, the golfers, the idea that the Republicans were, well, even when I was growing up, the idea that I was told that Republicans, as an argument, that Republicans were the rich people. The Republicans were all the rich people, and that they were the big corporation people and the big business people. And I knew that in my family, we were all Republican, and we were farmers, and it was the 80s, and it was the farm crisis, and we were poor. And I guess I looked at it like, well, we're not Democrat, and we're not rich, but the Democrats say that the Republicans are all rich. And I guess if I had to pick a side, if that's true, what the Democrats are saying, and then I learned at an early age that most of what they say isn't, but like, if it were true that the Republicans are the party of the rich people, then why wouldn't you want to be in that party? Like, go be like, that's what I would like to be. I guess I should go do that, instead of feeling sorry for myself and say, well, I'll never be a big guy. And I'm not a big guy. We don't have a lot of listeners on this show. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's big famous or anything like that. But my mentality was never the one that said, well, I'm a little guy, and so because I'm a little guy, I can't do anything. And I just felt like there was always more possibility in the Republican side. That doesn't mean that I'm, agree with all the Republican Party. I'm not a registered Republican or any of that. I'm conservative, obviously, but that doesn't, I felt like there was more hope in that strategy than in being classified as a particular victim. And then because I was a victim, somebody owed me something. That just wasn't part of my work ethic. Not the way I was raised, in my faith. And so I feel like the version of Democrat that RFK Jr. is the Democrat that I like. And I feel like the Republican, whatever Donald Trump is, I don't even know what a Republican is anymore, because Donald Trump is not a Republican. he's MAGA, but if you look at the Rockefeller Republicans, I don't like them either. Like, I can't stand them either. Those are the back boardroom folks that are, pulling the strings and that, that type of thing that the Democrats, in popular culture, lambasted. They were right to do so. So it's not that either. So I'm not sure what the Republican Party is right now. I'm not sure what the Democrat Party is, but what the Democrat Party is being represented as, I feel, can't be what most Democrats are. It just can't. I mean, abortion's in the street, like, free, but in Chicago, that's what you're going with? That sounds terrible. Like, come on. And the pride that comes with that, I just don't understand. And the unwillingness to change the federal bureaucracy. In fact, efforts to keep the federal bureaucracy, the people in it, in place. That just seems like a bad idea to me. I would like it very much if RFK Jr. I won't say I would like it very much, because I might come to regret this, but I would say that it would be very interesting, and I would find it greatly satisfying if RFK Jr. became the Attorney General of the United States like his dad was, just to see in the next 4 years, if Trump was elected, how much they could stir stuff up and get things corrected. Or, I hate to say it, I wouldn't want history to repeat itself, because we don't know. Well, maybe we do. We're getting an idea. Maybe we'll find out, just how sick and twisted the federal bureaucracy ultimately is. But it has to be corrected. It has to be fixed. There has to be something done that can slow our direction, whatever it may be. And it starts with, I suppose, you and I having a positive outlook on life, having a critical analysis of the things that are being said, recognizing that what is being spewed in the media, and it doesn't matter if it's CNN, MSNBC, any of the ABC, CBS, Fox News, Newsmax, whatever they are, they're all in my opinion, untrustworthy. Doesn't mean that you can't observe them and you can't hear from them, but you got to have your ears on and say, okay, well, that's hyperbole. That's ridiculous. Who needs the opinion of a journalist? Nobody, you don't need the opinion of me. I'm surprised you've listened this long. So, thanks for doing that. And, we'll see what happens. Be positive and be critical. I find it very interesting that RFK has endorsed Trump. It makes me happy to some degree because, like I said, I kind of liked RFK. I didn't think he had a chance to win, but obviously I prefer Trump to Harris when it comes to policies, because we've seen what the Biden-Harris administration has done, and we saw what the Trump administration did. And that to me is it's not like these are new candidates. We know exactly. Kamala Harris is not a new candidate. She's Joe Biden or Obama Part 2 or 3, or however you want to look at it. And so there's nothing. She's not a new candidate. She's not an outsider. Trump is not a new candidate. He's not really an outsider, although more of an outsider in the sense that he's been a elected official for a total of 4 years of his life versus most of the people that we're talking about have spent their entire useless lives as elected officials grifting off of the government. And for some reason, we still listen to them about what we should think and how we should feel. And I'm just not buying it. So end of the day, that's great. Enough rambling about it. I'm excited. I think RFK should be if Donald Trump gets elected, I think that RFK should be the, Attorney General. And call me crazy, but I think that would be pretty amazing to watch. Until next week, my friends, love you. And I hope that you are taking every opportunity you possibly can to laugh, to love your family and your friends, and to be the sunny side of somebody else's life.
I want to thank all our friends and guests for stopping by for this episode of the Sunny Side of Life. All the Sunny Side of Life players who stopped by, creative support provided every day by my incredible wife Heidi and our fantastic 4 boys. Thanks to every one of our listeners. That means you. A big shout out to my brothers and sisters in uniform holding the line around the world. Share the word, folks. Let the people know what we're up to. Subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow us on social media. All skits are written or adapted and directed by me, Troy Thompson, and are produced here at Sunnyside Farm Studios and delivered to all platforms by Buzzsprout. Music and sound effects are provided by Soundstripe. The Sunny Side of Life is a weekly production about our life on the family farmstead here in Iowa, the liberties we prize, and the pursuits which make us happy. Now, none of this is possible without Christ in our lives. For the Lord God is our sun and our shield. He gives us grace and glory. So may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may the sunny side of your life, liberty, and pursuits be in Christ, and made evident unto you each and every day, and give you peace.